Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
You can tell a lot about where a company is going by looking at where it's been. ConocoPhillips, Alaska's oil and gas company.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. It is the 20th of December. We are just hours away from winter solstice occurring at 8:11 tomorrow morning, so enjoy that and what is soon to come. As always, we encourage you to visit our website at arh.noaa.gov or more simply weather.gov. And when you get to that page, click on Alaska. That will take you to your nearest weather service community that serves your area or village. You can always find us on Twitter, on Facebook, and of course on our phone line there for the Alaska Weather Line. You can find that on the website as well, since I can't read it to you from this page tonight. So here we go. Off and running we go, and guess what? If you're in Southeast, another round of not only heavy snow, but probably some heavy rains moving your way as we head into the weekend. A winter storm watch is posted now for the Haynesboro and the Lynn Canal area, along with some strong wind that's coming your way. You could be looking at somewhere on the order of 7 to 14 inches of snow, maybe more in some select spots there. The winter storm watch will go through Sunday in some areas. For the southern sections of Southeast, you don't have any watches or warnings out right now. But just in the last 24 hours, one example would be Annette. You've had about 1.8 inches of rain. Very soggy weather there with the frontal boundary very close to home and low pressure working its way out of the region. As that system weakens, another one coming in with another slug of moisture could bring some heavier rainfall to your area around Annette and Ketchikan and again the southern areas of Southeast. So keep that in mind as you're making your weekend plans, and keep an eye on the weather. You can do that by going to weather.gov/Juneau or listening to your NOAA Weather Radio. A little bit farther north we go, and you can see that a large part of the western interior in the Yukon Valley and the Koyukuk Valley, all the way down toward the Kuskokwim Valley, and including the upper Kuskokwim Valley, is under some type of advisory. This is a winter weather advisory, and all areas here are looking at mainly snow issues, especially along the Yukon and north. But for a few areas around McGrath, a little bit further south, there's still a potential for some freezing drizzle or very light freezing rain. So you've got some winter weather advisories, some of those extending into the evening hours. And for many areas, especially along the Yukon and north, it's mainly for snow. So about 4 to maybe 8 inches of snow in some cases there. And again, your local forecast information on the web will clue you in on exactly what your individual communities may see. But that extends all the way out into Norton Sound and mainly north of the YK Delta. So a lot going on there across the interior and west as a winter weather advisory is posted there for many parts. And you can see that moisture stretching right up along that trough moving into the YK Delta this evening. Out ahead of that, another surge of moisture that's going to work its way toward southeast and south central tonight. No advisories posted for the Anchorage area specifically. However, along the Kenai area, we are watching for the potential for some freezing drizzle. So if you have plans to work along the Sterling Highway or perhaps down into the Seward Highway this weekend, that would be a good thing to keep an eye on the road conditions there as you travel. Alaska 511 is great to do that. A little bit further west out toward the Sea of Japan, you can clearly pick out another circulation of low pressure. This is working up toward the western Aleutians and probably dropping to about 960 millibars as we get toward the end of the weekend. This is really going to change the shape of the wind flow across across the Aleutians as we get into Sunday. So watch for some big changes there, probably some storm force winds coming up by the end of the weekend. So if you've got plans on the ship there as you get out into Saturday night or perhaps Sunday, you're moving north into the Bering, you want to keep an eye on this weather maker again as it's leaving the east coast of Asia. Let's focus again on the Kenai Peninsula briefly here. We've got low pressure that's working along the west coast and a slug of moisture moving north. Most likely, most areas in a large part of south central are mainly dealing with snow tonight. One exception would be Kodiak. You're probably looking at a better chance of rain. But as this works over, there's going to be an opportunity later tonight and early tomorrow morning where the profile of the atmosphere isn't all cold or all warm, where we would get all snow or all rain. It's kind of going in between. It's that dreaded in between winter potpourri kind of weather pattern. And what that's going to do is give us an opportunity for some freezing rain and freezing drizzle before going back over to snow as that weather system's moving through. So something to keep an eye on again if you're going along the Sterling Highway, the Seward Highway, mainly north of Anchor Point. So right about here and anywhere north, especially around Moose Pass and Turnagain Pass, you want to keep an eye on the road conditions. And like I was saying, Alaska 511, I believe it's 511.alaska.gov. Great help in determining what road conditions are. It's kind of the know before you go type plan if you can access that, especially if you're on the road system. That'll be very helpful. For southeast, again, a relatively clear sky for some places today following that low pressure system that worked its way out. And once again, another slug of moisture working its way toward you as we head into the weekend with winter storm watches posted in the north. And for the interior and the north, cloud cover certainly overtaking the region. Some spots of showers here and there of snow, but not a whole lot going on as far as heavy and steady precipitation. Places like Barrow and Points East, we're looking at some light snow, and occasionally looked like some fog was forming there across the Arctic coast. But by and large, things seem pretty quiet there across the north. Here's a few of those areas of snow we were picking up earlier this afternoon. High pressure sitting across the Yukon, really getting a lock on kind of stabilizing the weather there. Pretty cold, pretty dry, pretty clear. It's pretty usual for this time of the year. Low pressure out across the YK Delta at 986 millibars was working over Bethel earlier today. If you're out on the west coast and had anything to do with Bethel today, you probably heard freezing rain was falling there. It turned out to be about 3/10 of an inch. So some impacts there on the roads there, making things really slick as that was putting a decent glaze on some of the snow and the roads out there. So hopefully things are improving out there, but if not, just be careful. Out around Bristol Bay, some light rain moving in from the south and west. That will continue tracking north and east again and increase that threat for some freezing rain potential out across the lower and middle Yukon Valley as we get into tonight. Frontal boundary lies right across the north and eastern coast of the Gulf. Again, that was trapping some light rain across the region earlier today. That will still be possible as we head into tonight. Pockets of snow forming across south central, again with that opportunity for some mixed precipitation, probably freezing rain or very light freezing drizzle across some parts of south central and the Kenai Peninsula. Another wave of low pressure out across the west and central Gulf. High pressure across the western Aleutians, the calm before the storm. We've got a weaker wave just east of the Kamchatka Peninsula, the main low here already on the west coast, and that's going to bring some periods of heavier snow this evening through places like Nome, inside Norton Sound and the Koyukuk Valley there. Watch what happens tomorrow. The low still tracking north, pushing in more of a south and easterly flow through Kotzebue Sound, so you'll see those winds change on the marine forecast here in just a little bit. That will keep snow showers around parts of the Seward Peninsula tomorrow, but look how that stretches out that area of freezing rain across the central and western interior, the upper Kuskokwim Valley, all the way into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys just about. Snow showers are possible across the Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley. And if you're still watching the central and eastern Gulf, you see that moisture moving right back into southeast and south central. The winds coming through Prince William Sound, the cold front swinging over the Alaska Peninsula. Here's high pressure across the central Aleutians, and already you can see the impact of that storm that was moving off the eastern side of Japan. There it is by Sunday afternoon, moving towards Shemya and the western Aleutians at 962 millibars. Pretty strong fetch of wind coming in from the south and southeast, so again, watch for storm force winds with that. You'll see gales across southeast, the frontal boundary moving across southeast with some heavy rain potential again across southern parts of the Panhandle, and still looking at some heavy snow potential across the north with low pressure parked on the western side of Prince William Sound or very close to it. 990 millibars will start to develop a stronger north flow working through the Cook Inlet and through the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay area, so probably some storm force winds in this region as well, mainly in the waters, but again some stronger northerly winds coming in behind that storm for south central, and maybe some snow showers and light snow developing across the central and eastern interior as we wrap up the weekend with low pressure still parked across the west coast. So a lot going on with this weather pattern, and certainly a more active weather pattern for the Aleutians as we head into the end of the weekend. Afternoon temperatures today, teens and 20s for a large part of southeast. The extreme southern part of southeast, closer to the Dixon entrance, Craig, Klawock, Heidelberg. Those areas getting very close to 40 degrees by late afternoon. Yakutat was 26, 18 in Juneau. Teens, 20s across Prince William Sound, at least on the eastern side. Cordova is pretty chilly at 16, 30 in Whittier, 29 in Seward, 33 in Homer, 22 for Kenai and areas around Soldotna. A little bit colder there, 23 around Anchorage, a little bit farther up the road on the Parks Highway, 24 in Talkeetna, 25 in Wasilla. Glen Allen was showing 4 below, 6 in Fairbanks with 21 in Healy. Greeley was only 2, 5 below in Eagle, 11 below in Northway. Notice Arctic Village at 38 below. My goodness, that's cold. Fort Yukon 29 below. The Anaktuvuk Pass area is about 11 below earlier today. Ambler and Bettles, well, straddling the 0-degree line almost by equal amounts. The Arctic coast looking at temps anywhere from 15 to about 25 below zero. Barrow showing 2 below earlier today. Kotzebue Sound anywhere from single digits to about 12 or so. In Kivalina, 15 around Kotzebue, 12 in Tin City with heavy snow falling around 4 o'clock, and 17 in Nome. Norton Sound temperatures showing teens and 20s. Unalakleet was about 18 degrees with Grayling about 16 degrees. Aniak was 36, about the same there in Bethel. Again, you can see the warm air that was moving north and east there, turning the precipitation to rain. But again, in some cases, that could have been freezing rain. Upper 30s and lower 40s for Bristol Bay, most of the Alaska Peninsula, well into the 40s, including areas closer to Chignik at 46, 44 in Dutch Harbor, and low 30s for the central and western parts of the chain with the Pribilofs in the 20s. And there you'll stay tonight, about 24 degrees. Notice the warmth again building up the west coast. Teens, 20s, and 30s all the way from the Seward Peninsula, probably into Bristol Bay. Kodiak about 35. South Central, low 20s. Southeast, 20s and 30s, the warmest of your weather right there along the coastal sections, of course. The central and eastern interior, likely some of the coldest weather in the state as usual. 32 below or so around Fort Yukon, 1 below in Fairbanks, 17 below in Eagle. The Arctic coast expecting to see temperatures between 15 and 25 below. Nome at 14 and Bethel about 18 with a high of 23 tomorrow. Pribilovs likely hold steady in the mid-20s tomorrow, with the Aleutians expecting highs in the low to mid-30s. The Alaska Peninsula nearing 40, about the same in Kodiak. 8 in Fairbanks, 2 below in Barrow, and Juneau looking at about 34 with Anchorage closer to 30 degrees. Flying weather now, and you'll notice IFR conditions packing in across parts of the Copper River Basin, the north and eastern Gulf, and parts of Prince William Sound, as well as the western side of the Alaska Range and the Kuskokwim Valley in the lower Yukon and the Chukchi Seacoast. Your pass conditions then shape up like this. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass, probably VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should lead toward IFR conditions by the end of the day. And we'd expect Rainy Pass to stay around MVFR conditions, probably trending that way toward Windy Pass, and for Isabel Pass will continue at marginal conditions through the afternoon. Mentasta Pass we expect to see IFR. Tanita Pass will see some improvements during your Saturday. And for Portage Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions maintained across the eastern side of the entrance, and VFR conditions through most of the pass. Again, watch out for that freezing drizzle threat, as of course that affects airplane travel as well. Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions, especially with some improvement in the north, but that will trend towards snow as the day goes on, probably especially Saturday night and into Sunday. Freezing levels now, most of the state well below freezing, all the way from southeast to south central and southwest. Aloft, you can see that warmer air trying to overrun that surface freezing line. That is where the threat of freezing rain and drizzle comes from when we have that upside down kind of pattern. With that expected, we may see some icing issues again across south central. Some of those may be isolated to perhaps a little more widespread across south central briefly tonight and tomorrow. The main threats remain below 5,000 feet. The farther south you go, that's above 5,000 feet to below 10,000 feet. And out across the west, below 8,000 feet to above 4,000 feet. So kind of some varying levels there all the way across the southern third and southeastern parts of the state. The jet stream showing that ridge of high pressure across the eastern Gulf gradually transitioning eastward a little bit more. A digging trough across the west. It's pushing that next wave of low pressure quickly eastward at the surface. So a lot encouraging kind of a very active pattern across the southern third and again southeastern parts of the state, with a continued polar jet working across the Arctic coast at 60 knots there. So again, very active pattern pretty much at all levels of the atmosphere right now. At 9,000 feet, you can see a low pressure system parked across the extreme eastern end of Russia, right there around the Bering Strait. An onshore flow from the west bringing that wind speed to 25 and maybe even 30 knots or so across the YK Delta, keeping that weather system at the surface parked right here across the YK Delta. A brief ridge across the central and western Aleutians is allowing the storm out across the North Pacific to kind of gather some speed before it starts moving eastward. And south and westerly flow moving across southeastern Alaska has speeds anywhere from 30 to 60 knots at 9,000 feet, and that's a little bit slower there at 3,000 feet, but at 50-knot winds coming in will keep the moisture pouring right into your mountains and higher terrain. Low pressure outside Prince William Sound and south and east of the Kenai Peninsula continues there with the southeasterly flow coming into Prince William Sound. And wind speeds are generally light at this level across the interior, but they pick up across the Arctic coast with easterlies anywhere from 35 to 40 knots. Turbulence potential then mainly below 6,000 feet across southeastern Alaska as we head through the day tomorrow. Below 6,000 feet across the mid-Yukon Valley and the Koyuk Valley there in the Noatak Valley, probably around 6,000 feet and below, and across the YK coastline all the way from Nunivak Island and northward as well to St. Lawrence Island, and probably closer to coastal areas as the frontal boundary is moving through. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest this evening is Fred Keller. Fred has built several composite airplanes, home-built airplanes, and he's come back on Hangar Flying to join us. We were on the show last time. Welcome back to Hangar Flying.
Well, thank you. Enjoy it.
Last time we talked about the Defiant. We're going to put a picture up here so that we refresh people's memory about that you built that airplane.
Yes. Bert, after winning the Grand Champion in 1980, he came to me and said, would you like to build a Defiant? Because he wanted it documented and so forth. And that led into a set of plans which I drew up, and this airplane was slightly bigger than his prototype, and he was very pleased with everything, so we went ahead and sold some of those plans. But it later went on to other things, working for Beechcraft, and had to give up the home build.
Right, and for some of the people that don't know, the Rutans are also the ones that did Spaceship One and the first commercial plan into outer space.
Absolutely,
right?
yes. Yeah, his pilot, Mike Melville, know them very, very well, and used to have a good time going down visiting, and got a chance to work on the Voyager one time,
And also that's the one that went around the world nonstop.
Yeah.
Here's another picture that's coming up. Maybe we can talk about that one.
Well, that's a real nice picture. I enjoy is Dick Rutan in the cowboy hat, and Bert Rutan in the center, and myself off to the right. And we're discussing the two Defiants, and Bert has his hand on his Defiant and his left hand, and my Defiant is under his right hand. So, but we're discussing the different airplanes and characteristics about them. It was, again, back at Oshkosh.
So something I want to talk about in a safety-related thing, a lot of mechanics, people that build their own home builds, and they spend years doing it, and they finally get it done, and so they've perfected their skill building this airplane. Now they have to take off that hat and put on their pilot hat.
Right.
What's your advice to some of those people that would tend to rush into the flying aspect? Obviously, they're a test pilot to begin with.
Absolutely. There's several things that happen there. We can go back to some of Bert's good thoughts. And first of all, if you're flying a completely new home built with a experimental engine, then you want to be extremely careful. He always advised to put in a aircraft engine to start it out with, maybe put your automobile engine in later on or something of that nature. But you do need to go out and get yourself some flight lessons, instruction, because more than likely you haven't flown for a while. But one of the more important things too is to not set yourself up on the day of the first flight, or you're thinking of the first flight. Only have an individual or individuals that are necessary to help you accomplish that flight and do it safely. That's not where you want what I call Oshkosh fever to happen, and start doing some dumb things because there's too many people there watching.
That's true. A lot of pressure if you have your friends out there, and you're less reluctant, or I guess more reluctant, to turn around if something doesn't go quite right. And maybe you can touch on that. I mean, how do you know when you should continue on and not continue on?
Well, a person should really sit down and go over their limitations and set themselves goals for that day. And if they can't make those goals, or they're falling short in some manner, they should stop the situation, and go back, address those problems, and then look at flying on another day. too many folks can get themselves hurt in that kind of a situation.
That's good advice. Got another picture coming up, and maybe you can tell us a little bit
Oh,
about
that
what
brings back some real pleasant memories. Back in 1981, I was given the Wright Brothers Award back at the Wright Mansion in Ohio. And in this picture to the right is Paul Poborezny, the founder of EAA.
Experimental Aircraft Association.
Correct. And the beautiful lady in the middle is the niece to Orville and Wilbur Wright. And to hear her talk about the situation, she was 9 years old and she ran through the fields to go get a ride in a flying machine. And I could just feel the hair on the back of my neck raising up when she would tell us about that. And she was such a gracious lady. And she presented me with the Wright Brothers Award that year. Quite an honor.
Yeah, we have about 30 seconds left, but I didn't want to go let this picture get away from us. This is the last one. Quickly
goodness.
tell us about that.
That is the Radio Flyer wagon, and it's kind of interesting. I built a lot of home builts and 2 Oshkosh Grand Champions, but I'm probably better known for the Radio Flyer wagon. It was just something that my wife and I saw, and we thought that would be a neat way to convert her dad's pickup truck and have it to enjoy forever.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story, and I love that wagon, so maybe I can get a ride in that someday.
For
So
sure.
anyway, Fred, thank you very much for joining us on Hangar Flying. It was a pleasure, and hope to get you on again sometime.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you very much for watching, and fly safe.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Here's a look at today's Sea Ice Edge. You can always find this information and the tools to plot this on your own mapping devices with weather.gov at Anchorage/ice there. You'll notice the Arctic, of course, is filled in as well as the Bering Strait. We still have a little bit of a La Nina north of St. Lawrence Island. That will likely fill in pretty quickly with stronger north winds through the weekend, and ice all the way along the shore into Bristol Bay there, and also northern parts of Cook Inlet. Again, this information is available anytime from our Sea Ice program at weather.gov. Looking at southeast, strong south and easterly flow will continue along the coastal sections through Saturday afternoon. Looking at winds anywhere from 25 to about 30 knots or so. Waves around 11 to 13 feet. In the inner channels, 15 to 20 knot winds, mainly from the north along the northern half. But once you get closer to the Dixon entrance and the southern inner channels, that'll be more of a southeasterly flow. Getting into Sunday, a stronger southerly wind develops there, especially south of Sitka and west of Craig. There, 35 knots with a 12 to 16 foot sea. Winds still coming out of the north through the Lynn Canal as snow continues to fall across northern parts of the Haynesboro and the Lynn Canal region. A southeasterly flow across the southern inner channels all the way through Stevens Passage and around Yakutat. South wind 25 knots with a 12-foot sea. Across south central, a northeasterly flow coming out of Valdez and through Prince William Sound, 25 knots with a 4 to 6-foot sea. Southeasterlies there blowing outside of Prince William Sound and over Middleton Island. And easterly winds coming in across Homer and the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula, around 25 knots or so. Northeasterlies running on either side of Kodiak Island. Watch what happens on Saturday. Again, with freezing sprays still a threat. A strong westerly flow comes right across the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, and east of the islands into the western Gulf at 50 knots. So storm force winds certainly possible there, with more of a variable flow across the icy waters of the north parts of the Cook Inlet. A stronger gale will come across the central and northern sections of Cook Inlet at 35 knots, coming into Kenai there with a 7-foot sea. Freezing spray still a threat. Northerly winds coming out of Prince William Sound, and westerlies moving across the northern parts of the Gulf between 30 and 35 knots. East of Kodiak, that's a 40-knot wind. Low pressures working across the Alaska Peninsula tomorrow. And you can see that circulation shaping up here with a north and westerly flow north of Cold Bay with a 35-knot wind there, 30-knot winds south of King Cove and Sand Point with an 11-foot sea, and southeasterlies coming into Chignik earlier in the day. The winds will be switching around, of course, as the day goes on. And then a broad northwesterly flow takes shape on Sunday. Winds on the north side 25 to 30 knots and 30 to 35 knots as you head up toward Castle Cape. And again, most areas looking at about 9 to 12-foot seas there on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula as we go into Sunday. Across the Aleutians, a nicer day on Saturday with north and northwesterly winds. Cold, but the winds will be down. 11 to 14-foot seas there, 10 to 12-foot seas on the south side, maybe 13-foot seas there south of Nikolsky, and more of a southeasterly flow coming into Shemya. But take a look at Sunday, and the winds really come up here. with the south and southeasterly flow coming across the central and eastern Aleutians. 15-foot seas there south and west of Nikolsky. West of Kiska, you're looking at winds coming in from the east, feeding into that storm that's not even here, around 40 knots with a 18 to 23-foot sea. So things still worsen as we get into Monday, most likely. So keep an eye on the forecast there in the Aleutians. Across the west, a north and westerly flow coming into land and wrapping into low pressure moving across the Alaska Peninsula, 25 to 35 knots or so, with 9-foot seas north of Nunivak Island and 9 to 11-foot seas as you get out toward the Pribilofs. Freezing spray again south of the ice edge. And then winds reverse course, blowing back into the storm that's still sweeping up into Kotzebue Sound. A west and southwesterly flow developing with 20 to 25 knots. 9 to 11-foot seas are expected by Sunday. Across the Arctic coast, northeasterlies feeding into the storm here. 20 to 30-knot winds blowing down the Chukchi Seacoast. 15 knots there in the Beaufort Seacoast. And as we get into Sunday, not much of a change in direction. One exception would be in Kotzebue Sound, where the winds go around to the south and west with a 10-knot wind. Here's a recap of what's going on tonight. Active weather continues in just about all parts of Alaska, with southeast looking at some diminishing areas of rain across the southern parts today. A new winter storm is setting up for you, and a winter storm watch is posted, especially for the northern areas. It could see upwards of 7 to 14 inches of snow around the Haynesboro and the Lynn Canal region. Out across the west, winter weather advisories for freezing rain and drizzle and for snow across the Yukon Valley and down into the Kuskokwim Valley. As that storm's working its way northward, expect the potential for some freezing rain and drizzle to slowly wind down throughout the day. Most likely what you'll see north of the Yukon will be snow, but there is that potential for some mixed precipitation. Tonight into early parts of tomorrow, especially around the Sterling and Seward highways on the Kenai Peninsula, including some areas north of Anchor Point. You may be looking at some freezing drizzle as well. Freezing rain advisories have been posted for those areas, and snow is most likely across more parts of south central than anything else. As we get into Sunday, snow will continue spreading eastward, and stronger northerly winds start to affect some parts of south central Alaska, with snow continuing in southeast and stronger winds in the west. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. Have a good weekend and happy solstice.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.